Welcome to the Tepper School of Business Multimedia Series. For more information on the Tepper School at Carnegie Mellon, please visit us at www.tepper.cmu.edu/multimedia. And now, here's your selected video.
Thank you all for coming and welcome you to the Mellon Speaker Series in partnership with the James R. Schwartz Entrepreneurial Leadership Series. We're very fortunate today to have with us Housenbold. He's the President and CEO of Shutterfly. Jeff is also a fellow CMU alum, graduated with his undergraduate degree in Economics and Business Administration in 1991, and unfortunately went to Harvard University to get his MBA. Under his leadership at Shutterfly, he's grown the company from about $100 million in revenue in 2005 to around $500 million in 2011. Total market cap covering just around $1 billion. The now around 1,000 employee company is the leading site for sharing, storing, and publishing your personal digital photo library. Jeff is also sits on the board of Caesars Gaming Entertainment and Digital Chocolate, if you're interested in the extension of gaming into the online space. He also has held senior leadership positions in companies such as eBay, Alta Vista, and Raging Bull. He's also the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year of 2006. And needless to say, we have a lot we can learn. So without further ado, Jeffrey Howard.
Thanks, Ryan. So they asked me before I came, they said, do you want PowerPoint, you want multimedia? I said, you know what, we're going to go low tech today. And we're just going to do a fireside chat. And chalk and a chalkboard is as low tech as we can get, so that's pretty exciting. How many of you have taken Professor Damon's class on corporate restructuring? How many of you know how to do a DCF? How many of you know how to unlever and relever a weighted average cost of capital? Okay. So I'm here today. The topic of my speech is none of the shit you learn in business school matters. Okay. So you just do multiples anyway, and that's how you buy and sell companies nowadays. And you have to do multiples of revenues because so few of them have any profits. But I thought I'd just share with you my story about where I came from, how Carnegie Mellon influenced me, what I've seen in the business world, and not because it's the model, it's just a perspective, and really want to open this up to a conversation. What do you guys want to hear about? How can I help you? Is there a nugget or a different point of thought-provoking commentary today that helps you kind of think about the world in a different way? Someone asked me at a meeting before this what motivates me, and for me, I happen to grow up in Brooklyn in a very poor family on welfare and food stamps, and so I said not being able to eat at night drove my hunger, right? And that's really has motivated me in life is to prove the naysayers wrong. So my high school guidance counselor, when I told him I wanted to go to college, he said, well, you were good in woodworking. Why don't you become a construction worker? I said, well, I was thinking about college. And he said, well, Middlesex Community College has a great carpentry program. Why don't you enroll in that 2-year program? And I said, well, no, I was thinking about like a real school. And he said, quote, if you want to piss away $35 applying to Rutgers, that's your choice. And fortunately, I happened to date the valedictorian. Her dad was a ChemE. He told me Carnegie Mellon was a good place to go, and hence I applied, got in, and through the generosity of the alumni base and some hard work and good grades, I got scholarships for all 4 years that I was here. That didn't stop me and my roommate, who was in a similar situation. We dumpster dived all the time in Hamilton Hall and Scobell. Kids would eat half a pizza, so we'd go and eat the rest of the pizza, and that's how I survived in 4 years. That and charging the football players to do their homework, and one of them's in the back there, but we'll leave him anonymous. And so I had a fabulous 4 years in some ways, and a really not so fun 4 years in other ways, in that the education at Carnegie Mellon, both at the undergraduate and the graduate level, is amazing. And I know it's hard to have that perspective while you're in it because you're working hard and harder and even harder, right? And the workload is fairly onerous. And you know your friends who are at those Ivy League schools are getting great inflation and skiing on Wednesdays, so it makes it even tougher. But the preparation that you're getting, the teamwork, the analytical, the problem solving, the taking random data and bringing structure to it and creating pattern recognition and being able to make decisions under uncertainty are a lot of the tools that you're learning at school. And for me, that served me really well as I went through my career. It also taught me a deeper sense of work ethic. And today, my perception, particularly younger kids, is they don't have the same work ethic, right? This is the old, oh, it was tough, I walked to school barefoot 3 miles up and down a hill. But they want something different, and their work ethic isn't the same. And you guys have a work ethic and a stamina that will allow you to stand out from the crowd when you're in the workforce. Because what we want as hiring managers are folks who go above and beyond their job description. People who come to the job with a positive attitude, right? We've all worked on a team or in a company with the Debbie Downer, right? Someone who's always complaining, not bringing solutions, but just problems. Don't be that person, right? We're always looking for people who are going to solve your boss's problem, but let your boss take the credit, right? And that's the environment and the atmosphere that this community has created, and I think it will serve you guys well as well. So when I was in high school, we used to sneak into the movie theater, and a little movie, and I'm dating myself, but a little movie called Wall Street came out. And as I said, I grew up in a fairly poor family in Brooklyn. We moved to New Jersey. I saw this thing, Wall Street, and I was like, oh, Salomon Brothers? What's that? Drexel Burnham Lambert? People make $400,000 a year? Wow, that's for me. I'm going to Wall Street. And so I came to Carnegie Mellon and dumped the Chem-E thing because I dumped my girlfriend, and then became I became business administration, which back then was industrial management, and economics. And I was hell-bent on going to Wall Street. So after my freshman year, I summered at a local bank, and after my sophomore year, I summered at a bigger local bank, and then junior year, I summered at Citibank. And then I realized moving billions of dollars around on a dumb green CRT terminal in overnight swaps and options to large financial institutions was boring as hell. So I decided I'm going to get an honest job and not just move digits and money around. So I became a strategy consultant. And so I made the best PowerPoint transition slides you've ever seen, okay? And so I did that. And I was really fortunate that I didn't have your quintessential, 2 or 3 years analyst go to business school. I happened to sell some work. The client liked me. I came up with an idea. They grokked it. The firm made $14 million. I got a $14,000 bonus from it. And I ended up having about 60 other people working for me, some consultants and some part of the client. And it gave me my first real experience in managing people. And remember, I talked about the stuff they don't teach you at school, both undergrad and grad. All the stuff you're learning in your class is important as it recedes into your back of your minds and becomes a basis for information. But you won't remember how to lever and unlever a weighted average cost capital. It all comes down to people and management. Every single business, the number one capital inside the firm is the people. And so I got an early experience of making mistakes as a manager, learning some things, having the difficult discussion. I remember I had a 48-year-old veteran on my team who flew helicopters in the U.S. Army, who was a single dad and had 4 children. And I had to fire him because of chronic underperformance. That teaches you a lot. Teaches you how to deal with difficult situations while trying to retain the dignity and the respect and the consistency, but doing what's right by the company, the team, and the individual. So as you think about your careers and the course selection that you can have in your first and second year, try to fit in some of that softer skills, organizational design, how to interview, how to hire and fire, how to motivate, how to work cross-functionally, how to be a leader and a follower, and how to move between that kind of changing dynamic in real and virtual groups. Those are the things I think are more important than memorizing a fact you could look up or hire a banker for. So I went on to business school. And in business school, I went from thinking, okay, I want to be a banker to I decided I want to be a Hollywood agent. And this is what I'm going to do. And so I applied and got into Harvard Law School and Harvard Business School. And I decided after talking to the law students, They all wanted to work at Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and McKinsey. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to be a lawyer. I'm just going to go business, one major. It's easier. I get to nap, play intramurals, and meet a rich woman. So I decided to go to Harvard Business School, and I then do an independent job search in Hollywood, and I was fortunate to get a number of job offers coming out. But they didn't pay. Suits were not really valued in Hollywood, right? So coming out with undergraduate loans, graduate loans, and making $47,000 and didn't seem like the thing to do. My fiance, who's now my wife, was at Wharton, and it just economically didn't work. So I convinced Accenture to let me start the media and entertainment strategy practice. And back then, only a guy named Michael Wolff, who was at Booz Allen, was really doing any strategy work in entertainment. Most of it was process and technology and change management. And so I started out, my clients were companies asking questions about what's this thing called the internet? And folks like Bloomberg and Reed Elsevier and Walters Clower and Thomson, as you were having proprietary data feeds open up to a open network called the internet, their business models were in jeopardy. So I helped them do that a lot. Book publishers came to me. They were taking their books and putting them on things called CD-ROMs back then, and they were worried about, will publishing go away because of the advent of the internet? So how do you transform your business model from shipping physical goods to a digital realm, and how do you monetize that through sponsorships, advertising, subscriptions, and e-commerce? And so I did a lot of work in that. And then started helping large entertainment companies think about technology and in their businesses. And then a little company, a startup, came and said, we want you to do some corporate strategy, but we want to give you equity. We don't want to pay cash because we don't have any money. And the partners at Accenture said, no, we're Accenture, we take cash. And I kind of said, well, you don't get the new model. This was 1998. And so I went off to a company called CMGI, which was a big internet incubator in Boston. Lycos, AltaVista, GeoCities, a lot of companies came out of that. And then after doing that, I jumped into a portfolio company called Raging Bull, which was 3 20-year-old UVA students, dropped out with $1,000 from their grandfather's credit card, and they sat in a room with 20 different personas. They were message boards back then. They're social networks today. And they were talking to each other and talking about how Yahoo Finance isn't good and Silicon Investor isn't good and Motley Fool, and if you really care, come to Raging Bull. And we grew. They hired me as adult supervision as employee 5, and I was all of 28 years old, but I did the first day on the job. They shared one little office, and they had pictures of, I'm blanking on her name, but she was from the movie Seven Heaven, the TV show, and they had Pepsi cans and beer cans. And I said, let's get rid of all that so they don't take your internet company. I'm the adult here. And Jessica Love Hewitt or somebody. So we grew that business. We raised venture capital money. We raised Series A, B, and C. We raised $22 million. We spent 2 of it, and we went from 0 to 5 million users in a matter of 10 months. And back then, 5 million over the internet population was a very large number. And we were off to the races. And we sold the company to AltaVista, who CMGI had bought for $4.7 billion plus the assumption of about $2 billion in debt. And it was the last portal not to yet to go public. And we were about to go public. And I got the CEO asked me to move from Boston and come and be the GM of AltaVista and get us ready for the IPO. And we were supposed to go public Monday, April 19th. You know what happened that Friday before the Monday? NASDAQ crashed. The bubble burst. And I then spent the next year doing business undevelopment and laying off 400 of the 600 people who worked for me and unraveling. But before that event happened, I presented a strategy to the board that said the B2C world was moving to B2B world, and that we needed to go out and buy 3 companies. Verity for their enterprise search, they were number 1, we were number 3. A company called GoTo, which became Overture because they were monetizing search in a different way than the banner, and a little company called Google, who had about 80 or less employees and had no revenue and 1% of the market because they were on a distributed pizza box network, which allowed them to crawl the web in 3 weeks, and we were on Alpha mainframe digital equipment computers, and it was taking us 8 months. So that was the strategy. The board approved it. I came back early from my honeymoon to get the deal done to try to buy Google. And the discussion went something like this. You have no revenue, but we'll offer you $600 million. And they said, how about 8? And I said, how about 650? How about 8? How about 7? How about 8? How about 750? How about 9? How about How about 8? Let's get it done. I hit your bid. How about $1.1 billion? And we never got the deal done. So my claim to fame is almost bought Google 3 times in my career and failed all 3 times. And so then the bubble burst, we unwound, and I went to a little Beanie Baby swap site called eBay. And I joined as employee 1113, I think, and left at 14,000 4 years later. And I joined as the head of M&A. And my job was to buy PayPal, was my first job. And guess who was the chairman of PayPal? Same guy who was chairman of Google. So you know how that conversation went. We didn't buy PayPal. PayPal ended up going public. We paid a lot more than we could have had we just listened. And so I ran M&A, bought assets across the world, and then went on to start and conceive the business-to-consumer group, getting large companies to sell on the platform. We grew that from 0 to $87 million in 10 months. And then I went on to run customer acquisition, business development, customer retention. I did the AOL deal, the Yahoo deal, the Microsoft deal, and I was Google's first AdWords customer in the world. So there was a benefit of getting to know Larry and Sergey, and we grew eBay quite rapidly, and we were acquiring 68,000 customers a day when I left that job, which was amazing, the ubiquity of eBay on a global scale back then. And I got a call from a headhunter that I was using. I was on a board. I was the only independent board member. The VCs decided to fire their CEO. And in typical VC parlance, none of them had the guts to tell the CEO. So as the independent, it became my job to fire the CEO and find a new one. And I was using this headhunter. He calls me and says, "Hey, Jeff, I got a new search company called Shutterfly. Who do you know?" Gave him 3 names. A week later, he calls me and says, "How about you?" I said, no, I'm happy at eBay. Stock's doing well. My career's doing well. I'm not interested. Hang up with him. 3 minutes later, my cell phone rings. "Who the hell do you think you are won't have breakfast with me?" I'm sorry, who is this? "It's Jim." "Jim who?" "Jim Clark." And Jim Clark, the infamous Mr. Clark, who founded Silicon Graphics and Netscape and WebMD, and my CFO, was the chairman of Shutterfly and owned 52% of the company. Well, I had read the new thing, and that was kind of cool, and Jim has a big boat, so I decided to meet Jim for breakfast. By the way, the best boat is your friend's boat. And his is $177 million worth of friend's boat. So had breakfast. Breakfast turned into lunch. Lunch turned into drinks with the rest of the board, and 3 weeks later, I was CEO of Shutterfly. And I joined, and we had $54 million in revenue, 103 employees, and we had a market valuation of $110 million. And today, 7 years later, we did $499 million last year, 1,050 employees, and about $1 billion that oscillated between $1 billion and $2 billion. And so it's been a fascinating journey to go from little David competing against Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Costco, Facebook, Apple, Yahoo, Microsoft, and Canon, HP, Xerox, lots of large companies, and be David beating Goliaths. And some of the secrets to that success is know who your customer is. A lot of small businesses and new startups, they try to be everything to everybody. Know who your targeted demographic is and serve them really, really well. And our targeted demographic is women. 85% of our customers, she's 25 to 55 years old, but our prime demo is 30 to 42 years old with children in the household under 10. Why? That's when you take a lot of pictures, and the pictures matter. So it's different than me taking a picture of your ham sandwich and posting it on Instagram, right? I'm talking about the birth of your child, your daughter scoring her first goal, a ballet recital, your parents' 75th wedding, birthday, 50th wedding anniversary, the moments that matter in life. People have been capturing, telling their story, and passing them down for generations to come since the beginning of mankind. Cavemen were etching in cave walls, Egyptians were using hieroglyphics, French Renaissance Impressionists were using canvas and brush. We're just using a different technology to help our customers capture their memories and pass them on for generations to come. So know your customer, and because the content is much more valuable, they're willing to pay for it. So in the 7 years I've been at Shutterfly, there's been more than 1,000 venture-backed companies who have come and gone in the space, backed by very, very famous, successful entrepreneurs and VCs, and they've all failed. And they failed because they focused on being a feature or a functionality, not on a robust business. So slide, glide, film loop, Photo TLC, Scraplog, Cool Iris. Lots of these companies have raised cumulatively, my best estimate is about $900 million in venture money that has been spent and gone because they built feature functionality. So as you think about your businesses and the roles you have, know your customer, make sure there's a business model. The third thing is hire the best and brightest and create an environment that's both a high-performance culture and a great place to work. And one of the things I'm most proud of is the accolades that we receive about being an employer of choice. I live in a valley where we're competing with Facebook and Google and Yelp and Groupon and Zynga and eBay and Yahoo all down the street from us. So how do we attract and retain great people? How did we become one of the best mid-sized companies to work for, best company to work for in North Carolina and in Phoenix where our facilities are? It's by attracting people, giving them high-impact jobs, getting them the resources and getting out of their way, right, and mentoring them along the way. So think about the human capital again, because I think that's essential. And then be innovative. The world changes around us. Macroeconomic recessions, technological changes, competitive reactions, consumer taste. They're going to continue to change. You have to be flexible. And if you look at what's happening in the world, eBay went through a very rough patch because it didn't adjust its business model. One of my competitors, Kodak, filed bankruptcy 2 months ago after 100 and something years of owning this space, both from a brand equity and a technological standpoint. There's example after example after example of if you don't eat your own lunch, someone else is going to come along and do it. And that is really hard the bigger the company gets to do that. And so at Shutterfly, what we're doing is we're carving out a new business initiative group, and we're incubating a set of new businesses that we're running as venture capital startups. So one of them's getting a $500,000 Series A round, another $5 million, another $1 million. And we're going to run a series of tests with milestones and benchmarks that they have to achieve before they get the next one so that we continue to innovate. So the experience here, when I joined, Mr. Clark convinced me this was a great opportunity, which it has been the best opportunity in my career. I also realized my first 3 days, they hired me to take the company public. And I spent my first 3 days in the banker bake-off in the lawyer's office. 16 different banks coming through, all telling me they're the best on Tuesdays. If it's a $300 to $312 million deal, they're the top of the league table, right? How many of you came from banking? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about, right? Everyone's book tells me they're number one, and they're completely undifferentiated, and like any service business comes down to the people. And I decided a week later in my first board meeting that we didn't have the people, the corporate governance, the points of differentiation, the strategy, the values, the behaviors, or the vision for success yet. And so I delayed the IPO by 18 months, and we went public in September 2006. And since then, we've had a great deal of success, and we've continued to grow organically and through M&A. And so it's been a fabulous experience. And then I sit on 5 or 6 other boards and do some angel investing to stay relevant. So Caesars and Digital Chocolate are about understanding what's going on in mobile and social. I sit on the board of Clover, which is a peer-to-peer mobile payments company. I sit on the board of a nonprofit, the Children's Museum, understanding customer segmentation and how to market to consumers with no budget, which makes you kind of do viral and guerrilla and grassroots marketing. So there are many little internships while I have a full-time job that I get to continue to learn. And that's the other important thing is as you engage in your careers, the world moves so fast now. Don't get stagnant. Figure out how you're going to stay current. What are the lifelong relationships you're developing with the professors and your classmates here? And how are you going to continue to stay relevant in your respective industries? So that's kind of me. I owe a lot of my success to this institution, to the generosity of my professors and my mentors and the alumni who helped me get a great education. And so I'm thrilled to be back and I'm honored, but want to flip it back to you guys and answer any question you have. Please.
But I'll just start with a 2-part question. My name is Sunday, by the way. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
To Pittsburgh. You are a new media visionary.
So my bio says.
What do you think will define new media for the next 5 to 10 years, and how will you lead Shutterfly toward that vision?
Great. I think there's a confluence of a number of things that, has been talked about in the popular press. One is mobile is going to become ubiquitous, right? When I came to Carnegie Mellon, we were on Apple IIs, okay, and you had to go into the lab and, you had to use those. Thank you for teaching me COBOL and Fortran, by the way. Very, very, very useful. And so mobile, we all have computers now in our pockets, right? And in tablets, and so mobile is going to continue to be important. There's a greater sense of local, right? That we operate in a very global world, but local is where a lot of the GDP gets transacted on a very narrow local basis. And then the third is this notion of social. How do you, the empowerment of the consumer, that ideas are freely exchanged. And so how are we combining local and mobile and social into our services and our products? For me at Shutterfly, we also think about how do we empower users to create their own products, which they do. So unlike, say, Amazon, you buy a standardized SKU, our customers create their own products at Shutterfly. And they're reliving those powerful positive memories because most individuals don't take pictures of sad things. And so their synapses are firing and they're reliving that, and that halo effect comes back to, and they give it to us at Shutterfly. And our net promoter scores are just unbelievable. They're higher than Nike and Apple and BMW. And the loyalty rate, 75% of our revenue every quarter comes from existing customers, and that base of customers grows quarter after quarter after quarter. So how do I create the right environment for our customers to be creative and have progressive discovery so that even the basic users can come in, but the most advanced users can still find the capabilities. And from a UI UX standpoint, that's a very hard thing to do. I think about how do you allow our customers combine their own content with their community's content with professional content in a way that's pretty interesting and seamless. So imagine you just went on a trip to Italy and you got a bunch of great photos, right? And you were there with another couple and they took some photos. How do you share that? But you were also on a tour, so you want some of that community's content, but you didn't get a great shot of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? And you want that professional photo at night with the light beaming down. So how do you take all that content and combine that into a photo book? How do you take pictures, video, music, and audio and combine that into multimedia experience to tell your story and pass it down? The most powerful of our senses is actually smell. I don't know that I'm going to have smell chips into my products anytime soon, but voice. Imagine me being able to tell the story. I have 3 boys, 6, 8, and 10, of this was your first baseball game with your dad when the Giants played the Seattle Mariners, and he can hear my voice regaling and reliving that story, and my grandkids and my great-grandkids can hear that. So we're thinking about using technology on the front end of the experience and opening up the network to allow people at their choice to be able to combine community, professional, and their own content. Very different than Facebook, whose business model is based upon the widest open graph possible. Our business integrates with Facebook, but on a consumer choice basis. We default to off, they default to on, and there's a need for both, and I think a very healthy coexistence. I'm also thinking about global, right? So a lot of what gets created in this great country happens to get replicated overseas, and what you've seen is Groupon do a very nice job of buying over 35 companies on a global basis in its first 18 months because they were fearful that there would be a lot of imitation and that they would lose some of those economic rents. So how do you move quickly globally? And we're thinking about how do you take Shutterfly global. So those are some of the trends. And then lastly, I remember being at undergrad and at business school, and there were some themes that the professors would talk about and you would read in the paper. The paperless society, the networked home, just-in-time manufacturing, right? Many of those, I still can't get my microwave to stop blinking. So the networked home is, still hasn't realized its vision. I'm printing more than ever before. And if you look at Hewlett-Packard's earnings, they make more money from ink because people are printing more, right? But just-in-time manufacturing in our industry is really here. So I have no inventory, really. I have 50-something inventory turns a year, and I have 1 day's a WIP. I have blank paper and ink, and my customer comes in, creates something, I print it, I drop it in the mail stream in 24 hours. And in 1 to 3 days, depending on where you live in America, your product is delivered to your home. Right? So the advent of technology, not just on front-end Web 2.0 technologies, but really in digital printing, just-in-time manufacturing is coming to bear in a way that the unit economics on a unit of 1 can be profitable and at a low cost enough to be palatable to consumers. So those are some of the trends.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julianne. I'm a first year. Kind of more interested in you as a leader. What kind of values and principles do you hold dear and that you try to emulate all the way through your career so far?
It's a great question. And as you think about your jobs coming out of Tepper, find companies whose values and behaviors resonate with yours personally. If there's friction between those, you're not going to succeed or you're not going to be happy very long, right? And so values and behaviors, mission and goals of the company, and how is it aligned with your personal objectives as well as your professional objectives. For me personally, I think about passion, inspiration, action, commitment, and trust, all wrapped in a layer of high integrity. So at a point in time in my career, I was the head of M&A of a company, and I reported to the CFO. And we were doing a deal, and I couldn't get the numbers to work. And I trying. Finally, I said, hey, boss, I can't get these numbers to work. This is a pretty smart, well-seasoned CFO. He's like, I can't get them to work either. We go into the president's office. The president throws a binder at my head. It says, you're either on the team or not. Which is it? Well, the president and CEO were cooking the books. And I discovered it through this M&A transaction. There was a complex layering of debt with subsidiaries, and it wasn't at the scale of Enron, but it wasn't good. And 3 days later, I resigned, and 4 days later, the CFO resigned, and I went on to go to CMGI. I was 10 months into my first year on that job, and I joined the company. It was at $3 billion, and 10 months later, it was at $7 billion, and my stock options were worth a lot of money. And I was 27 years old and had a lot of debt. I could have just toughed it out for 7 more weeks and made a lot of money, but it wasn't the right thing to do. So the key is your reputation and integrity. For me, open, honest, direct communication, care enough to give feedback. It's a gift when people give you feedback. No surprises. Be passionate. Act as a shareholder, right? Think about the long term. Those are some of the things that I kind of instill. It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? It's okay to make mistakes, but learn from them. So we try to celebrate our mistakes at all hands meetings. At Shutterfly, we do postmortems like doctors do to learn from those mistakes. I had a guy at eBay. We were doing a deal with Microsoft. If any of you have ever worked with Microsoft, it took 10 months to negotiate the document. It should have been 40 pages. It was 312. And I had mentioned to this particular senior director, make sure you get this clause in the document. 7 months later, he comes to me white as a ghost in my office, realized he forgot to do that, and it was going to cost us somewhere between $5 and $10 million. And so he's like, I'm sorry, I resigned. And I said, well, what did you learn from the experience? And by the way, 5 to 10 is a lot of money, but when you're spending $800 million a year in that group, you can absorb it, right? And so he made a big mistake. I happen to have a good enough relationship with Microsoft that we acted under the spirit of that, even though the letter wasn't in the document. But he went on to work harder and be a better boss and a more committed employee because of that. At Shutterfly, my second year, we had about $80 million of revenue. I had the senior manager of marketing. She came to me. We were doing a promotion, but you had to input a promo code, and she forgot to do that. And so it was open to everyone, and it was on these coupon sites, and it was on these blogs, and it cost us $1.4 million. And she was crying in my office. Well, today she's my vice president and GM of the business. Luckily, it didn't take the business down, but learned from that mistake. So it's okay to make mistakes, but you have to learn from them, and you have to be courageous enough to share so that everyone can benefit from it. Those are some of the aspects. And then be customer-centric. Your customers pay your salary. Delight them. Go above and beyond, and they will reward you in the long term. And so some great businesses lately have been very, very customer-centric. And Shutterfly has been ranked in the top 10 of e-commerce companies for the 7 years I've been there on customer service. So it's something that I'm very proud of.
You mentioned a lot of companies came with a lot of features. I was curious if you can highlight the key difference between customer-focused and feature-focused. The reason I ask is a lot of those features are there to serve the customer, but they don't survive, and I wanted to ask you if you can help.
Yeah, there's no right answer. It's a balance, right? And part of the challenge is you get people sitting in Boston or New York or Silicon Valley who make these features because they're cool, right? And they have broadband capability, and they have mobile devices. And in our business, our customer is Mary Lou sitting in Madison, Wisconsin, trying to preserve her 4 children's memories. And she's like, wait, you want me to do what? Right? So it's a cool feature, but she's not going to adopt it. And so you have to find the right balance of what is useful, and are you solving a big enough problem that the customer is willing to pay you and pay you sufficient for the cost of capital of that business. And so that again goes back to knowing your customer, and there's ways to test that, right? Usability, focus groups, longitudinal and ethnographic studies, and there's a lot of ways to go out and test that. But in the web world, you can just put it out there and see the receptivity, and you could run experimental design or A/B tests and say it's free, it's $1, it's $2, right? You can kind of ascertain the price elasticity fairly quickly. And then you have to figure out which of the products and services you're making you want to monetize directly. So for example, we have something called Shutterfly Share Sites. It's our social network. We have more than close to 5 million of these. We're adding 25 to 30,000 a week. We have no marketing spend against it, and they're targeted at educators for classrooms, youth sports, families, events, and it's a closed social network with all the power and features functionality of Facebook, for example. I make no direct money from there, but I invest a certain amount of money a year because indirectly it's doing customer acquisition for me. It's enhancing my brand. It's creating a point of differentiation. And so I look at that not just on its pure direct P&L, but what's the indirect P&L. So there are some times where features you give away free because you make money in a different place. That's okay. But if your whole business is essentially a feature, like photo sharing is a feature, who pays for photo sharing? Nobody, right? Number one way people still share photos is email, right? And so if you just have a feature and it's not solving a big enough problem that people are willing to take out their credit card, then you don't have a business. You have an idea. Now, luckily, about 30 of them a year get bought by Google, right? And they then tuck the code into something else, or Facebook or Microsoft. But you only hear about the successful ones. You don't hear about the other 10,000 failed features. So as you think about if you're entrepreneurial and starting a business, solve a big problem, and your solution has to be simplistic elegance in a way that will get customer adoption at a value that they're willing to pay for.
Hi, my name is Nikhil. I'm second year. So I had a question about the technology industry. Just wanted to see what your views are on the current technology industry. Do you think there's a tech bubble happening, or do you think?
So I don't think there's a tech bubble happening. I think there's a valuation bubble happening, and it's happening in a big way, and it's happening in a bad way, and it's happening in an unsustainable way. And so it is amazing how quickly we forget March of 2009, right? How many of my friends' houses got repossessed, right? And they had to go down from 2 Ferraris to 1. I mean, it was really painful. That was their second house got repossessed, by the way, in Tahoe. Humans have an amazing ability to forget pain, right? We put it in the recesses of our mind, but there is a bubble. But what I've seen, I have a lot of friends who are VCs. I serve on a lot of boards with VCs. In the last 90 days, there's been a demonstrable shift. So in the last few years, it was let's just throw gobs of money at things because let's get scale quickly. And you look at Groupon's doing a wonderful job in a lot of ways, but it's not a tech company. They're throwing humans at it. Right now, they're starting to realize that doesn't scale. And they threw gobs of money at that because it was get big fast. Well, there's a sustainable growth rate, right? And often your culture will suffer if you grow too fast and you don't solidify what those core components of your company is. Often that you won't be able to scale, right? You have to have people, process, and technology scaling at the same pace, or the whole enterprise can collapse. And so I think there's a valuation bubble going on right now. And so people are throwing gobs of money. And then you guys have heard of Bucks. It's a restaurant near Sand Hill Road. And I was there for a business meeting with the CEO of a 20-something billion dollar company. We were just catching up. And you could see all the business deals still happening around. It's like I'm raising 5 on a pre of 15 with 3 PowerPoint slides because it's a play on Foursquare plus Facebook, plus Airbnb, plus, like, really? And the problem is there's too much money flowing, but the LPs, which are usually endowments and teachers and firemen's retirement money, they're starting to realize that the returns on average in Silicon Valley have been essentially zero for the last 11 years. Now, it doesn't mean a single firm hasn't, had a 30% return, but the average of Silicon Valley in the venture model has had 0% return for the last 11 years. Fortunately, I'm an LP in several of those funds, and so zero is not too bad when you get 17 bips in your cash account now anyway. But they're starting to wake up, right? And if you look at the average IPO that went public in the tech sector in the last 12 months, it's trading 47% below its IPO price today. And so there's a realization that that's happening, but it's slow and people are reticent to want to recognize that what we were doing isn't sustainable. So graduate quick, sell your business before the bubble bursts. Facebook valuation, right? I have this theory. Companies get valued in 3 phases. Phase 1, and this is your multiple, which our famous dean likes to teach you guys in that fancy course. So you have multiple, and it's the highest when you're trading on hope. And then you generate something called revenue, and you get a multiple of revenue, and generally your multiple comes down. And then ultimately you start to generate free cash flow or profits, and usually the multiple is the lowest. Now, that doesn't mean firm value isn't maximized here if you have sufficient free cash flow being spit off, because yes, in the long run, your stock price should still be the discounted cash flows back to the present day. In the short term, there's irrationality. Markets aren't, so you guys learn about rational markets. That's true over a long period of time, over a long data set. But on an individual issuance in the short term, there's a lot of irrationality. Go look at Angie's List or some of these other, and they're trading on hope. Right? So is Facebook worth $100 billion? You have to believe a lot of things go right simultaneously to get to $100 billion on the next 3, 5, or 7 years worth of free cash flow. But what's baked in there is a premium because they're a platform, right? What's baked in there is because there's a premium that they have 800 million worldwide users. Yes, their growth rate of user acquisition is slowing, but that's because we're getting penetration of people who can afford to have internet connectivity. But that is such a large base, and it's larger than, think about any other distribution channel doing national broadcast television, for example. Right, the Super Bowl, I think, has 110 million people who watch the Super Bowl. So they're getting a premium because they're in the hope stage, though they have some revenue and profit, but it's hopeful that that's going to blow up, and they're going to take monetization from $1 to $2 per user and bring that to $3 to $4 a user. But I can't get there now I'm an investor through an LP of a fund who's investing in Google, so I'm hoping they have $100 billion. But I can't get there on the current set of metrics. But there are very, very few companies in our career, and I've seen in my career Microsoft, I've seen Dell, I've seen eBay, right? I've seen Facebook. There's a handful of companies in your career that have the capability to be platforms, and that's why they're trading at that valuation.
I think we have time for one quick question, guys.
Sunday?
Jeff?
It's hard to forget your name, Sunday.
I'll tell my mom. Can you tell us how it's different to be a CEO today than how your job was 10 years ago? Because I think we maybe hopefully have some CEOs, future CEOs in the room. Yeah.
Well, I'll talk about how it was different 7 years ago when I became the CEO of Shutterfly. And there's a difference between public and private. So one way is I'm now old. I'm 42, and there's a bias to 25-year-old CEOs, so which I don't think is very healthy or sustainable either. I think it's fantastic that it's not about your age or your tenure. It's about your capability, and you could go on and do great things. And by the way, academia should take a lesson from that. But I don't think 25-year-olds have the people management skills often to run large public companies, right? I think we're setting them up for failure. The expectations we have of some of those iconoclastic founders, often they don't make good CEOs, they make great founders, right? So I think about teeing people up for success. But the CEO job's getting harder and harder. It's more complex, it's global, the pace of change and information flow is increasing. The visibility to mistakes through social networks and media proliferation is much higher. The personal risk from a Sarbanes-Oxley in a highly regulated environment is more difficult. The frequency of quarterly earnings stifles innovation and long-term shareholder value creation in our society. I think Europe has a better model where you do it every 6 months. Holding on to talent, my father-in-law has been at the same company his entire career for 38 years. Today, people don't ever think about that, right? It's a talent-free agency, so holding on and attracting talent when information now is easy to go onto the web and see what the average salary for that function is with that level of, so you have to create a deeper relationship and engagement level with your employees than you had in the past. Opportunity is more boundless for people who are educated. You have to deal with global competitors. You have to deal with intellectual property in a way in a litigious society where our patent office is completely broken and out of date. It creates, again, I think, a deadweight loss to society in terms of that economic tax. And it's more complex. And the average CEO tenure of Fortune 500 company is 22 months. So the patience of Wall Street, I've lasted 7 years. The patience of Wall Street is much narrower. Their long-term thinking is 3 months. Hedge funds are 3 hours. And so again, all these things I don't think are great for our society on a competitive basis against state-planned countries who are doing things slightly different with different incentives. So I think it's harder and more complex. But again, our society and the capabilities of our people continue to advance to handle that increased complexity. So I think you guys are getting a great education and developing, as I said, lifelong relationships both with your fellow students and the faculty and the brand and the institution of Carnegie Mellon, and that will serve you well.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, everyone.